The first one is going to be scientism. Now, what does scientism actually mean? Scientism basically is the view that the scientific method is the only method to render truth claims about world and reality. In other words, science and its method is the only way to come to truth. It's the only way to derive truth. It's the only way to form conclusions about the world and reality, man, life, and the universe. Now, this is not true. And we're going to give some reasons. But before I do that, we have to understand we're not rejecting science here. What we're doing is we're understanding science in its correct place. We're understanding what science is and what its scope is. But there are a few people, not academics by the way, because they understand that scientism is incoherent, but rather the popularizers like Richard Dawkins or Professor Lawrence Krauss, or we have other popularizers in the media, on the web, what I would like to call the neo-atheists, apologizers, if you like, yeah? They come across with this narrative, they assume this narrative that science is the only way to form conclusions about life and the universe and truth. But this is not true for the following reasons. Number one, scientism is self-defeating because it claims that the scientific method is the only method to form conclusions about truth and about life. But that statement itself cannot be proven scientifically. So it's self-defeating. It's like shooting yourself in the foot. Because the statement, science is the only way to form conclusions about reality and about truth, cannot be proven by science. It's a metaphysical claim. It's an assumption. It's a philosophical presupposition. It's a philosophical axiom, if you like, which means a self-evident truth. And it can't be justified using the scientific method. So the irony is that the thing that it's implying can't even prove its own statement. So it's saying science is the only method to form conclusions about truth. Science is the only way to truth. Okay, well, if that's the case, can science prove that statement, which says science is the only way to truth? No, it can't. So it's self-defeating. Secondly, scientism cannot prove necessary truths like mathematics and logic. In actual fact, you need mathematics and logic before you have science. So for science to say, or scientism to say, you know, science is the only way to form truth about things. Okay, well, can science prove mathematical truths? Can science prove logical truths like 1 + 1 is equal to 2? Now you may say, well, that's directly from experience. No, it's not. Let me give you an example. What is 1 fufula plus 1 fufula? It's 2 fufulas. Now you haven't had any empirical sensory observation of a fufula. You don't even know if a fufula exists. But you know 1 of something plus 1 of something is going to be 2 of that thing. This is a logical necessary structure in your brain. So it transcends science, and you need logic and mathematics before you have science. So we can't claim now that science is the only way to form conclusions about things, because it can't even prove the conclusions of mathematics. The third point is science cannot prove other sources of knowledge that are really necessary. Now, in epistemology, which basically means the study of knowledge, the study of belief, there are some sources of knowledge, and one key source of knowledge is called testimony, which is basically relying on the say-so of others. Interestingly, the scientific method requires testimony. If you study the scientific method, if you go to the Berkeley website and you look at the scientific method, you could Google this yourself. The consensus of scientists or the results coming from other papers from other scientists are necessary for you to form conclusions about your own experimental data, okay? And that is testimony. You have to rely on the say-so of others. Now, they may have claimed they've done the testing, they may have claimed they've done all the results and they've done the experiments themselves, but you haven't seen it. You have to require their testimony. So interestingly, a lot of our beliefs is based on testimony too. For example, the majority of us, we believe that the world is round. Prove it. Many of us can't actually prove it. We haven't gone to the highest point on Earth to see the curvature of the Earth. We haven't flown from England all the way around back to England. So you know, if you fly in a straight line, you're going to end up back into England, for example, so that means the world is round. Many of us have never done that. We've just seen pictures, photographs, and we learned it at school. All of these are testimonials. We have to believe someone is saying that this is a image or a map of the world. We have to just believe that based on the say-so of others. Now you may think, but everyone believes it. That's true, but that's still testimony. And interestingly, the thing that science requires, which is also testimony, can't be proven by science itself. It's another source of knowledge. So it shows that science is not the only way to form conclusions about things. We need this shared information via different sources of knowledge. To highlight this, interestingly, I had a debate with Professor Lawrence Krauss, and he was like, evolution is true. And I said to him, okay, fair enough. Prove it. And actually I asked him, have you done all the experiments yourself? Because he said, everything must be proven by experiments. And I said, this is very interesting because, do you believe in evolution? He said, yes, of course. I said, have you done all the experiments yourself? He said, no, I haven't. There you go. You have to believe the testimony of other scientists or other conclusions or other philosophies. So testimony is a valid source of knowledge. And therefore, it shows that science is not the only way to form conclusions about things. You need other sources of knowledge too. So scientism is incoherent. It's wrong. Now, we have to understand, brothers and sisters, this doesn't mean Islam is against science. Of course it's not. Because even Allah says in the Quran, in chapter 41, verse 53, we will show them our signs in the horizons and within themselves until it becomes clear to them that this is the truth. So from this perspective, Allah is saying, look into the empirical world, look into the interconnecting principles of nature. There's going to be some truth there for you. In this light, Professor of Philosophy Shabir Akhdar, in his book The Quran and the Secular Mind, a philosophy of Islam, he basically talks about the objectives, if you like, of the Quranic ayat concerning the rububiyyah of Allah, the lordship of Allah, the oneness of Allah, the fact that Allah created everything and He sustains and maintains everything. And he mentions it in a very nice way. He says, nature's flawless harmonies and the delights and liabilities of our human environment with its diverse and delicate relationships are invested with religious significance. Created nature is the cryptogram of a reality which transcends it, and nature is a text to be deciphered. Evidences accumulating in the material and social worlds and in the horizons jointly point to a hidden immaterial order. In a nutshell, these ayat are referring to there's a hidden wisdom behind the design in the universe. If there's a design in the universe, there's a designer. Look at the empirical nature of ourselves, of reality, and you will come to the conclusion that there must be some kind of purpose and wisdom behind this creation. So Allah is telling us to look into scientific knowledge from this perspective. And we know that Islam has had an unprecedented brothers and sisters, unprecedented kind of influence on the West concerning science. Look at Islamic Spain, when we had the convivencia, which means coexistence. Because of the justice principles and the tolerance principles from the Quran and Sunnah, we were able to create a society that Muslims and non-Muslims looked into the interconnecting principles of nature. So they could actually understand what is reality. And from this perspective, even thinkers and historians and Arabists like Professor Thomas Arnold in his book, The Preaching of Islam, very famous book that's used in academia, he concludes that if it wasn't for Muslim Spain, we wouldn't have the Renaissance in essence. And he says, Muslim Spain had written one of the brightest pages in the history of medieval Europe. And then he continues, and it was from her, Muslim Spain, that Christian scholars received what of Greek philosophy and science they had to stimulate their mental activity up to the time of the Renaissance. So, just to conclude this point, scientism is incoherent because it says that science is the only method to use to find truth. This is not true. As we discussed, there are other sources of knowledge like testimony, which science can't prove, mathematics and logic, it's self-defeating, and everything else we just mentioned.